Making Trinity and beyond wasn't the culmination of my interest in nuclear weapon history. That interest endures to this very day, as I continue to discover more about a history that was never taught in school. An interest that was sparked many years earlier. In 1972, when I was 15 years old, I visited Japan that summer. The journey brought me to Hiroshima, where I visited the Hiroshima Peace Museum near Ground Zero. At the museum, I was separated from my group and found myself in a small theater where I watched a movie about the bombing of Hiroshima. The aftermath of the first nuclear weapon to be used against a city. Being the only American in the room, I watched this movie while everyone else watched me. What those images did to me, and obviously the power of those images, and how they affected everyone else in the room. That had a profound effect on me. Not only watching scenes of the devastation, but also coming to grips with an understanding of the power of media, as well as the power of the bomb. Years later, I began to research more about the atomic bomb. And the more research I did, the more I learned about a history that had eluded me growing up. I had always had an interest in communications and media, an interest that inspired me to follow a career into filmmaking. Naturally, that interest in filmmaking made me curious about the films and images that had captured the history of the atomic bomb. From that first dark night in July of 1945, when the light of the Trinity test first exposed film running through dozens of cameras, to the end of atmospheric nuclear testing many years later, my fascination grew. A lone obelisk made of black stone stands quietly at the very spot which had burned as hot as 10 million degrees only 50 years earlier. It's hard to imagine the scale of this obelisk until someone stands next to it. This is Barbu Marian, our director of photography on Trinity and Beyond. It's even more difficult to imagine the immense scale of the bomb that exploded that night in 1945. Like the program that the United States embarked upon to test more and greater weapons, I too embarked on a quest to find the films that had captured those moments in history. I felt it was important to interview one of the advocates of nuclear weapon development, Dr. Edward Teller. And after much pursuit, I was able to get that interview at his home in Northern California. Dr. Teller would become known as the father of the hydrogen bomb, a weapon that would dwarf the size of the atomic bomb in power and magnitude as those weapons evolved. To heighten the experience of these weapons of mass destruction, I called upon William Stromberg, a young and talented composer, to write a score fitting for the power of nuclear weapons. Along with John Morgan, Lenny Moore, and Edgardo Simone, they created over an hour of music performed by the Moscow Symphony Orchestra. While most of the film draws upon archival footage of the nuclear era, I drifted momentarily into the realm of fantasy, creating an eerie sequence as might have been imagined by mannequins, left in a house soon to be destroyed by an atomic test.
The shockwave will arrive in the control point area in approximately half a minute.
Apart from that sequence, the scenes are terrifyingly real, and they are terrifying because they are real. During the making of Trinity and Beyond, I kept track of the names of the cameramen written on the slates. Slates are the identifications which are photographed at the head of a roll of film that indicate the date, the location, and more importantly, the name of the person photographing the roll of film. I learned about a studio in which these cameramen worked, a place called Lookout Mountain Labs, hidden away in the hills of Hollywood, California. One day I met with a Warner Brothers studio executive who told me he had someone working in the film vaults that was a member of the Lookout Mountain crew, a gentleman by the name of Sam Calvano. To my delight, many of those who had worked photographing the history of the atomic bomb tests were still around at the time. Since I had just finished making Trinity and Beyond, I felt it was only fitting to honor the men who had photographed the actual footage I had used. What those in the film industry might call a wrap party. So I was able to bring them together nearly 30 years after the closure of their secret film studio to tell their stories. As it turned out, the world was eager to listen.
I didn't really know what it was like. But this thing was right in the heart of the state, and there were a lot of people around. I can do it.
Yeah. So we're going to be there, and like you say, we go all over the world.
And as they say, the rest is history.
This is Jack Cannon, the single framer that I was telling you about earlier. Please, no pictures.